Okay, good evening, everyone. This is our latest episode of I Have Such Sights to Show You. And for tonight, I have a very special guest. He was the screenwriter behind Hellraisers 2, 3, and 4. He also did the screenplay for Wishmaster and a few other movies to go along with that. So I have here tonight joining me Peter Atkins. How are you doing tonight, Peter?
I'm doing okay, Josh. How are you doing? And thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you for accepting the invitation. I'm doing fine, doing really well.
Yeah.
Do you prefer Peter or Pete? Whichever one.
I mean, whatever you're comfortable with, but usually Pete.
Okay, we can go that route. So, of course, many people, you've been involved with the Hellraiser franchise from damn near almost the beginning. Um, I guess going back before the days of Hellraiser, of course, you're known for being a screenwriter. So, when did you catch the writing bug, and
Mm.
what made you think, why would I accept a such a thankless form of artwork, such as being a screenwriter? How'd
Yeah.
you get started in it?
Um, well, it's interesting. I'll answer the question specifically in a moment, but oddly, one of the reasons I did is that although you're right, I didn't officially become involved with Hellraiser till number two. Um, I kind of predate the first movie in the sense that me, Clive, and Doug, we're all from Liverpool, England originally,
Hmm.
all kind of the same age, although they're a couple of years older than me, which I like to, especially as we get older, I like to remind them of that. But we'd all done fringe theatre and indie cinema together I mean, way back, I mean, literally 50 years ago now. I met them in 1974.
Wow.
So, so in a way, my route into the arts in general, and as you say, the strange career choice of screenwriting, kind of came about, kind of in a way because of Hellraiser, even though Hellraiser was still 15 years in the future, you know.
Hmm.
Um, so I was in the theatre company with Clive and Doug for 7 or 8 years. Um, then I left to go back to Liverpool. We'd moved to London by then, and we were failing in London just as spectacularly as we've been failing in Liverpool as a theatre company. And I went back to Liverpool to get back into rock and roll because I'd been in a band before I joined Dog Company. Um, but Clive and I stayed, very close friends. And
Hmm.
after I always get the timeline slightly wrong. So I'm sure there are some Hellraiser scholars and Barker out there who will actually know the dates on this better than me, and they'll write in and tell you, Josh. Believe me, they will. Um, but roughly speaking, Clive, he wrote the Books of Blood, which is his first collections. I mean, I always like to make this joke as a side hustle because we were still doing the theatre,
Right.
and Clive was our resident playwright, and he thought, I don't want to say cynically because we all grew up loving horror. We can get into that conversation in a minute if you like. So I don't mean cynically, but he very consciously thought maybe I could make some money if I wrote some little horror stories on the side, and it could help underwrite
Right.
the dog company, the theatre troupe we were in. So I always like to tell people that our Books of Blood, it was just a side hustle. He just did it. Um, but anyway, he then became quite successful with that and the novels that followed. And um, I had dabbled in writing a little bit before that, but once I turned 30 and realized I wasn't going to become a rock star, I started writing short stories. And obviously, I sent them to my mate who'd had his short stories published, so we might know something. Um, I mean, he was great about it, very nice. But rather than just be nice about it, much to my surprise, because by now it was about 1986, 87, he sent one of the things I'd written to Chris Figg, who'd been the producer, Clive's producing partner on
First
Hellraiser.
Hellraiser. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I apologize in advance to people who might be listening. I have told this story before, but it is literally true that Clive phoned me and said, "Have you written a screenplay?" And I told the truth and said no. And he said, "Okay, listen, a producer's going to call you in 5 minutes. When he asks you if you've written a screenplay, will you lie?" And I said, yeah, you bet. Sure. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, a very posh voice came on the phone. Clive, Doug, and I are from Liverpool, which is the north. I'm a blue collar kid. So you can tell that the Beatles sound different from Prince Charles or King Charles.
Right.
Okay, so we sound like the Beatles. Chris Figg sounds like King Charles. So this very posh voice came on the phone and introduced himself, and then sure enough said, "Well, he was very nice. He'd said, oh, Clive Barker's given me one of your novellas, said some nice shit about it, and then he said, so tell me, have you ever dabbled in screenplay?" And I said, "Oh yeah, one of my favorite forms." And he said, "Great, why don't you come down to London and we'll have a chat?" And literally, that was my way in. So that's a very long-winded way of getting to your actual question, Josh.
No,
But
that's fine.
but in other words, I hadn't ever really, I'd never thought as a, like when I was at high school, I never said to a careers counselor, "I want to be a screenwriter," because I wasn't really sure such a profession existed, to be honest. I think, like a lot of people who buy in too much to the auteur theory, I kind of assumed the directors and the cast made it up on the spot. I know they didn't make it up on the spot, but I hadn't thought that through much. So it wasn't really a career choice. It was more that my band was failing. I mean, we were still playing the pubs and clubs in Liverpool, but nobody was giving us a record contract. So it wasn't so much a career choice as a financial opportunity. Chris Figg offered me money to write a screenplay, um, and then how do I say this without? I mean, I guess I did well enough at it. But as a consequence of that, I mean, even before the movie was released,
Right.
or produced, even, I mean, Hellbound, um, New World, who were the money behind the first two Hellraiser movies, um, they liked what I did enough to offer me a couple of rewrite gigs, um, which was really surprising. And it also meant, and again, like I say, working class kid from Liverpool, what that meant was they were going to fly me out to Los Angeles, put me up in a hotel, and have me rewrite a movie for them. So I thought, fucking hell, this is great. Um, and in fact, the movies that I did, that I did the rewrite gigs for, they ended up not getting made, but I got an agent out of it, and had these now existing relationships with producers. So for the next sort of 15, 20 years, I was a working screenwriter. I mean, the only stuff that was made is the stuff you're familiar with.
Right.
3 Hellraiser movies, Wishmaster, a couple of TV things. There was a Tales from the Crypt spin-off that I did an episode for. Um, and as you've probably heard from other people in the business, the thing about screenwriting is until they hate you or you really screw up, you can actually make a living even without being produced because they pay you to write the scripts, even if
Right.
they don't make the movie.
Oh, okay.
So I knocked out about 20 scripts on contract and commission over the next couple of decades, but very few. Tony Randall and I made a live action remake of an anime called Fist of the North Star, so that got produced, and then later a script that Tony Hickox and I had co-written got made years later, actually, as a very, very bad movie called Prisoners of the Sun, which really pissed us off because we thought it was one of our best scripts. But
I was gonna
oh,
say because I
go ahead.
looked that up and I'm like, that looks interesting. I haven't seen it yet, but I was like,
Watch
"Man,
the
I might put it
trailer.
up."
The
Okay,
trailer will make you think, oh, that could be a fun movie. Cherish that thought.
and leave it there.
Yeah, 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 right.
Well, it sounds like Clive kind of like chose your profession for you. He said, "You're going to be a screenwriter now," kind
Yeah,
of.
well, I get. I mean, yes, although that makes him. Clive is a very magnanimous and very good friend.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that was more a sort of self-preservation move because I think Chris Figg wanted him to do about 3 movies at once following Hellraiser. Eventually, Nightbreed was going to happen. There was also going to be a Harry D'Amour movie, and Chris wanted a sequel to Hellraiser.
Right. It's just
So I
too
think,
much
I
for him.
think, without taking anything away from Clive's generosity of spirit, I think it was more, fuck me, I can't do all of these. I better grab Pete, and it was it was more asking me to help him out than anything else. But yeah, that put me on that path, and
So with Hellraiser 2, did Clive have a few ideas that he threw your way and you
oh
just kind
sure,
of
yeah.
and did you just kind of did the two of you have an idea what you wanted to do with the story because it basically takes, it starts pretty much
It's an
right where
immediate
the
sequel,
first
yeah,
one
right, right.
leaves off. So did you have an idea where you wanted to take the story? Did Clive give you like a few little pointers or a few
Yeah,
ideas?
it's and again, I've told this story before, so I apologize.
Yeah.
I'll try and make it brief and funny. Um, yeah, so the sequence was I did that initial chat with Chris Figg, and I'll tell anybody who's interested in not just in screenwriting, but working in the arts in terms of at a commercial or
Hmm.
industrial level. Um, the primary it's good to have some talent. It really helps to have
Right.
some talent, but I'd say almost equally as important is don't be a dick. If you're good in the room and people feel comfortable with you, you are infinitely more likely to continue to be gainfully employed. Um, so Chris, God bless him, had I mean, I guess I was good enough in the room that Chris thought, what the hell? I've got New World's money in my back pocket. I may as well pay this guy to write something. So what the sequence actually was that uh, Clive literally had one night to spare. Um, so I went round to his place and what? Well, I've said before, it was like being back in the. We had worked in theatre together for nearly
Right.
a decade, as I say, and then we remained friends, but we hadn't worked together for 4 or 5 years, which at my advanced age doesn't sound any time at all. But back then, it was like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's an eternity. Yeah.
ages ago, I used to work with this man. Um, but we got right back into the sort of rhythm where anyway, I went round to his apartment. He opened a bottle of whiskey and we spent the next 3 hours coming up with the story of Hellbound. Obviously, he already had ideas in his head. It was a sequel to his movie. Um, but we just sat there and, oh, this could happen. And what if the way you do? I don't know if you've done any improv or collaborative work yourself, Josh, but whether you're in music or theatre or, as it
Mhm.
turns out, the movies, um, the back and forth is very important, and it's really where all the hard work is done. Um, so, again, without in any way wanting to be dismissive or reductionist about Hellbound, which obviously I love because it kicked my whole career off. Yeah, it was a 3 hour drinking. We finished the whole fucking bottle of whiskey, so I was really. I go, oh, that's the secret. That's where creativity lies. Just keep drinking. Um, and that was pretty much the story. I mean, obviously, nothing was written at this point, but it was pretty much the story that everybody ended up seeing a year and a half later. And again, if people want the nuts and bolts of how it works, what happened was I woke up the next morning with quite the hangover. Thank you, bottle of fucking whiskey. And got on a train, very bleary eyed, back to Liverpool, and wrote what we call in the trade a treatment, which is a short document that tells the story of a movie without too much detail, certainly without dialogue. It I find them the worst things to write because they're dull as shit. It's just, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens.
Right.
No flavor, no spice. But on a manual typewriter, this is the sort of ancient history you're talking about here, John. On a green manual typewriter, I wrote, I can't remember if it was 5 or 10 pages, but basically taking what Clive and I had come up with. I wouldn't even say I sharpened it that much. I made sure it fit what we call the 3-act structure, that there's
Right.
a break here, then a break there. Sent that to Chris Figg by post because email had not been invented. Had it? I mean, certainly it wasn't in our lives. It was 1987. I guess technically there were probably some colleges somewhere that had email capabilities, but we didn't.
Probably. I didn't hear of your email till the 90s, so.
Yeah, right. That's my memory. So I'm a late adopter of things anyway. But so sent it to Chris, and Chris had a couple of good notes because Chris. Oh, I do want to rewind just for a second.
Okay.
Because again, I always put this caveat in when I tell that story that I mentioned earlier about Clive saying, a producer's going to call you, will you lie? I don't want people to think, ha ha, Clive and Pete put one over on this idiot producer. Because Chris is sharp as hell.
Okay.
But he's the reason he's a good producer is A, he's very smart himself. B, it's very enthusiastic, which is another vital thing you need.
Right.
And C, and in a way, this is the most important of all, he responds well to sharpness and enthusiasm in others. So I want to make it clear that it wasn't like we bamboozled him. He probably knew it was bullshit, because he thought this is.
I was wondering.
Yeah.
Oh, he knows now for sure.
I've told him many
Okay.
times. But yeah, no, Chris is a great producer, and so I can't remember what notes he gave me on the treatment, but they were sharp and precise. So I tarted it up a bit, and then he basically said to New World, about whom I knew nothing at that point. He said, "Oh, I've got the writer for Hellraiser 2," and the other thing I owe my career to is the weakness of the pound against the dollar in 1987, because I mean it's a self-deprecating joke, but it's a little bit true. The pound was doing so badly against the dollar that nobody ever said this, but I believe that somewhere in the numbers crunching departments at New World, they thought, "Oh, Chris Figg's found a British writer. Ugh, it won't cost us anything. Let's have him do a draft." And basically, Chris just got them to agree without meeting me or anything that he'd develop the script. So they moved me down to London, put me in a hotel with my manual typewriter. And Hellbound was and Chris's only instruction was, "Can you get me a draft in 3 weeks?" And I said, "Yeah," because I had no idea. And I said, "Oh, sure." And then the only thing, and this is really good advice, the only other thing he said, just as I was leaving his office, he said, "Oh, Pete, remember, no dialogue longer than that on the page." Meaning, don't give any big, long Shakespearean monologues. Keep it tight, mate. And then I realize in retrospect, probably some kind of unconscious act of rebellion, the script of Hellbound opens with a fairly fucking long monologue from Dr. Chenard, Dr. Malahide, as I called him in the first draft.
Right.
We changed the name later. So I don't know if that was me. I've got no memory of it consciously at the time. But I realise now, well, wait, we opened with a long monologue, and Chris's one instruction to me was keep dialogue tight. So I don't know if I was just fucking with him or whatever. But anyway, but apart from that little bit of disobedience, that is good advice from a producer. Don't blather on. Keep it punchy. Keep it moving. You know, that's
I would agree with that. Sometimes things, movies especially, sometimes they drag a little bit, and sometimes, I mean, sometimes you have to take your time building tension
sure.
up and whatnot. But yes, you see this a lot with movies where they just almost take, where basically literally nothing is happening for the first hour, so you never want to, you'll lose your audience that
No,
way.
right. I mean, at the risk of sounding like a grumpy old man yelling at a cloud, especially right now, like everything is 2.5 hours long right now. And no offense to the filmmakers involved, none of whom I shall name. It's like, mate, you've got a good 90-minute movie in there. Trim away some of this crap. Because, I mean, again, the caveat is a brilliant long movie
Hmm.
feels shorter than
Right.
a terrible short movie. So, you know, as long as you've got the audience hooked, I
It's
remove my objection to long things. But generally speaking, it's like,
Yeah, I
come on,
agree.
yeah,
Well, and of course now after, so going back,
yeah,
you'd mentioned you had been a horror fan
yeah.
way before then. So what were some of your early favorites? I'm imagining that you were probably into the Hammer films of the 60s and
Yeah,
70s.
absolutely. I'm that generation. But uh, actually, I can't remember if we were already on or if you told me before we went live, Josh. But you said the original Dracula got you into it, meaning Bela Lugosi, not
Yes,
Christopher Lee.
yes. Hmm.
Well, me too. Not necessarily Dracula individually, but despite being in a way the Hammer generation,
Right.
it was really the Universal movies, all of, as I'm sure it was for you guys, all of which were showing on English TV when I was 8, 9, 10, 11. So it was really the Universals. And shortly after that, um, the classic period Hammers. 'Cause I was born in the born right in the middle of the 50s, born in
Right.
1955. So I was sort of too young for classic period Hammer in the theatres. But by the time I was, I'm going to guess 12, 13, 14, they were reissuing them on double bills, which you're probably too young for that to have been a thing. But it,
Barely. I barely remember them.
right.
They used to do that sometimes here in the States,
Yeah,
but
oh no, sure. Yeah, it was
that
definitely
probably stopped
right.
probably,
Once TV and VHS were around.
I would say by the early 80s, that
Yeah,
probably all
yeah,
stopped.
right, right. Um, yeah, I mean, in the UK too, same deal. But because we didn't have VHS, because you couldn't go and rent a movie, there was for quite a while. I mean, like, my first James Bond films, because I was a little too young to have seen them first time out. So my first James Bond films were a double bill reissue of
Mhm.
From Russia with Love and Doctor No. Um, and so a lot of the Hammer movies um, I saw as double bills, not really on a sort of formal re-release. It was just it was a looser system where individual cinemas, movie theaters, could call the local distributor and sort of, in other words, it wasn't like a nationwide double
Right.
bill release of Horror of Dracula and Curse of Frankenstein, but a local cinema would say, "Oh, get a couple of horror movies in for Sunday, and we'll bring the kids in." Sort of. Anyway, I'm making this far too long an answer, but yes, the old Universals, the old Hammers, and I am old enough to be. Um, capital M, capital K, a monster kid, which is the children of Forrest J. Ackerman, who edited
Oh,
a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland. Um, I think it began in 1958, so I mean, I wasn't reading it from issue one, but I remember going into the newsagents where I bought my superhero comics, my Marvel and DC comics, when I was again, 8, 9, 10, in the same rack that had the comic books. There was this thing um, with a painted portrait of Lugosi's Dracula on the cover. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wanted it. And it was an issue of famous issue 31. I'm guessing again, some scholar will correct me, but so I took home that issue of Famous Monsters, and for a couple of years, I would always call them monster comics. I mean, they weren't comics; they were magazines. But because they'd been in the comic rack, to my
right.
9-year-old brain, it was like, "Oh, monster comic." So pretty much anybody my age, Josh, it's the Universals, the Hammers, and Forry's magazine, and the Twilight Zone on TV, and the Outer Limits on TV. So very much the usual suspects for people born in the late 50s, early 60s. So it was all that stuff. And I'd started reading the literature probably naturally. I mean, it might have been because of the movies, like
Hmm.
um
That's the way I was. I would
yeah,
watch. I'd be the type that would watch the movie first, and then if there was a book made of it, then I
mhm,
would go back and read the book. A lot of people are. It's the other way around.
sure,
'Cause they'll read a book as soon as it comes out to press, and
yeah,
then whatever year, 2 years later, it comes out as a movie, and they, as is the case with a lot of Stephen King fans. But I'm always the one that watches the movie
right.
first, and then read the book.
How often do you find the book disappointing after the movie? Because that's like a big ongoing debate, isn't it? Because everybody talks about Jaws and The Godfather as being the movie is definitely better than the book, and then there's a whole controversy about other books. But
Um, I think it just depends on the story. I
sure,
remember reading Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula,
yeah,
and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein after I'd seen the movies,
yeah,
and of course they're a lot different, and so I was kind of taken aback by it until, but I was a kid then, so as I got older, I got to appreciate them, and I understood that it's just not necessarily reasonable to adapt every single thing from a book, or else you're going to be like making a 4 or 5 hour long
yeah,
movie,
right.
and certain things just don't process well watching it than it
Oh yeah,
does when
yeah,
you're
100%.
reading it.
I
So
agree. And like you, I was certainly too young to read Frankenstein. I read it like you. I think I was 10 or 11,
mhm.
and it was that weird thing where I was precocious enough to recognize that it was probably good, but I wasn't really enjoying it. It was a little too. It's like Dracula. It's all what they call an epistolary novel, right? It's all diary entries and letters back home.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I remember thinking, yeah, the Karloff version's better than this, because right,
It's what we visualize. This
yeah,
is
right,
this is,
right,
and we
right,
think that the book's going to be like note for note
yeah.
exactly like that story was.
Oh
So
yeah, I remember Dracula, unlike Frankenstein, was a little because obviously it was written nearly 100 years later, 1818, 1897. And so Dracula is a little nearer to modern sensibility in modern English. So it's a little more pacey. Um,
yeah,
but I remember at one point he talks about Dracula's mustache. And again, I'm 12 years old.
right.
And Dracula's mustache, what the fuck is this? Mustache. It's terrible. Um, but yeah,
It's so funny because a couple of years ago, the newest Nosferatu movie,
right.
and everyone complained about the mustache. I'm like, well,
Well, Yeah.
Look at the guy that they're he had a big handlebar mustache, so it makes sense.
Hmm.
So if that's all you're going to complain about, then I
Yeah.
guess the movie
Sure.
worked all right then.
Right.
Um, but now going back, we go Hellraiser 2 is done. It's a huge success. Probably I would rank it as one of the best direct sequels to the original. I kind of like
Oh, thank you very
I
much.
would rank it up with Bride of Frankenstein and Halloween 2 as far as being the
Wow. Yeah.
best direct ones there.
Oh,
So
wow.
then New World
I like
Pictures.
you. No, no, seriously, thank you. That is high
Oh, you're
praise.
welcome.
I love Halloween too, but my favorite movie is Bride of Frankenstein. So I mean,
That's a favorite of many, and that's like one of those rare
yeah.
occurrences where the sequel's actually maybe
Oh
better
yeah, I think so.
than the original, and the original is great too. So
Yeah, right.
no, I mean you got well, as part of my childhood. Tell you a quick funny story here.
Mhm.
And of course, I had watched the first Hellraiser on VHS. I think sometime around the summer of '88. My mom, being a fairly open-minded person, allowed me to rent that,
Yeah,
whereas my dad, who were divorced at the time, would not let me watch something like that.
right.
But and then later on, I remember October of '88. I remember watching Halloween 4 in the theater, and then one of the trailers before the movie came on was for
Oh,
Hellraiser 2.
yeah,
And as you know, we didn't have social media back then. It's just
right.
movies just came out. You might get a little bit of press before they came out. And like, oh wow. And so that I remember seeing that like the day before or a couple days after Christmas of '88. So that's been a big part. So I was like, I remember joking that I actually had to because I was afraid they were going to card me get in there, so I bought a ticket to a cheap some
Oh, good for you. Yeah,
some PG Christmas movie. I
yeah,
don't even remember
yeah.
which one, and kind of snuck in. So if I ever see Clive Barker, and I guess you too, I have to I owe you guys like $5 or whatever it
Oh
was.
no, I'm
But
just glad you got in to see it.
yeah,
Um,
but of
yeah,
course after that,
what's Christmas? Yeah, it's still I don't keep track of it myself. I haven't got a chart with the dates of release, but people are kind enough on social media to
mm,
remind me when these anniversaries come up. And it still surprises me when people remind me it's Hellraiser 2's anniversary because it's the day before Christmas Eve. And it was like, what were New World thinking? What a, what a stupid release. I get, there used to be that the marketing people had this buzzword, uh, not counter programming. So I guess
yeah.
they figured it was counter programming. We'll be the only movie out that week that isn't family
Well, yeah,
fun.
you got to figure there's like probably some people are probably sick of the Christmas shit by
Yeah,
that
right.
time and want something different. So if you're like the only horror movie being
Yeah,
released that week, from a market that kind of makes sense. So
that was their logic, I guess. And as you say, the movie was. I mean, again, I'm always careful about saying this. It's not. We were never hits the way Nightmare on Elm Street
mhm,
or especially Halloween. We did fine, and they were profitable enough for the producers and the studios to keep making them. But they were smaller movies and less spectacularly big hits. I mean,
right.
they did fine. They charted, but yeah, it was. Anyway, what I was really saying about that was it didn't really seem to damage it that it came out at Christmas. It did do well. I think technically it made like 500,000 more than the first one, so
Right.
we were pleased.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, and that's the thing about the Hellraiser fandom. We're kind of like a much smaller niche,
Right.
kind of a little bit. We're kind of like I think it's kind of the way Texas Chainsaw Massacre was for so many years. It was never the big, huge hit that
Sure.
those that followed it, but they've always had their small core audience. And over the time, we end up having kids, and so therefore they're going to become
Yeah.
fans of those movies, and it just kind of grows steadily.
Oh
So,
yeah,
are you?
no, I'm really touched how many. I mean, obviously, I'm touched that the older fans are still fond of
Mm,
the Hellraiser movies, but I'm genuinely surprised and thrilled that you get like these 25 and 30-year-olds who dig them, which is great. But I've got to pick up on something you said about Texas Chainsaw because I'm going to rat Clive out as a wimp because back in, was it 74?
Yeah,
TCM
year
came
I
out?
was born.
Yeah, and it hadn't been released in England yet, but we were hearing these horror stories about, this, it's the toughest, grossest, nastiest thing you've ever seen. And um Clive and I, being pathetic, what was it? He would have been 21, I would have been 19. Um God, not even actually. He would have been 20 and I would have been 18. Anyway, we were little scaredy cats. And but back in those days, pre VHS, I'm sure you're familiar with it. There used to be this home medium called Super 8, where you
Mhm.
could buy little digests of movies, little excerpts from movies
Oh, okay.
on
Yeah.
8mm film, literally on film. And not a lot of houses. It was very much a niche um, hobby. But I had a Super 8 projector. And for some, mostly you could only get excerpts, as I say, but for some reason, some weird thing to do with the distribution in the UK of the movie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was available on Super 8 as a home medium immediately, or within a week of the theatrical
Oh,
release.
wow.
And I remember saying to Clive, "Hey, and it was expensive. Super 8 movies were like nothing like the VHS revolution. It was quite an expensive thing, but people would rent them. And I said to Clive, hey, I could rent Texas Chainsaw and I can project it and I can project it really small. And maybe if we look at it just, as a 3-inch wide picture, we could handle it." And he said, "Oh, I'm still not sure I could. Let's not." So that's Clive Barker, ladies and gentlemen. Wimp.
Okay. I think he's probably since then
I think he's seen it a few times since then. Yeah.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Now, after Hellraiser 2, New World Pictures, who went, I guess, bankrupt or out of business.
Yeah.
So we had this strange little limbo where, from what I understand, Hellraiser 3, it was like unclear who had the movie rights and all that stuff. Once they got that cleared up, Hellraiser 3 comes up, and not only do you write the screenplay, you even appear in the movie.
I
You
do.
are the bartender who then gets transformed into, I don't know what the character's
Well,
name,
we
but the
we call him
bartender.
Barbie, but it's just it's just a gag.
Was that you? Was that actually you in the makeup and all that?
Oh yeah, no, that
What?
was the thrill. I got to play a monster. It was fantastic. Although I would like to say, for the record, and again I've
Mm-hmm.
said it before, um, it was a fat suit. Now the sad thing is, were they to revive Barbie now, I wouldn't need the fat suit, but I was not that size when we shot the movie. So yeah, it was a nice big fake belly. Bob Keane from Image Animation, who'd done Hellraiser 3. Of course, we shot in the US in North
Right.
Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
but we brought Image. Half of Image came over. Um, oh God, have I missed some of the names? They'll fucking hate me. Um, Jeff didn't come over. Jeff Portis didn't come over. Let me just say, Bob Keane and the lads were over.
There we
About
go.
half of Image Animation came over and did Hellraiser 3. So yeah, that was me. I wasn't just the barman. I actually got to chase Terry Farrell down the street breathing fire. And who wouldn't want to do that?
No, why not? Yeah, that was a lot. That was like such a little bit of a different movie because oftentimes I said the first two Hellraisers would often get lumped in with the other slasher films, and really the first two Hellraiser really aren't slasher films. But Hellraiser 3 is definitely more into that late 80s, early 90s slasher vibe. And I can understand why. I know some people who
Sure.
cite that one as their favorite, so I could understand it.
And some
Um,
people cite it as the worst. They really think it took a nosedive. Um,
it's just a very different tone,
it's
but
different. Yeah.
it's still like I'm trying to think of the word. It's still connected to the first two films. You can feel the connection. There's
Yeah.
still the music's a little bit um is similar. I don't think Christopher Young did the score
Chris
for
is
that
more than.
one.
I mean, Chris's themes are used.
Yeah, his
It
themes
was
are
a
used.
perfectly good composer called Randy Miller. but it also, you know, it had a lot of rock songs on the soundtrack of the
Oh yeah,
film.
Motorhead
Um,
especially.
I mean, this is a separate story, but the fact, because you know we revere Lemmy,
Mhm.
and the fact that Lemmy and Motorhead sing the song over the closing credits of Hellraiser 3 is like, that's just great. Because it means that, like, technically, if you hit the cross pollination feed on IMDb, it says Peter Atkins has worked with Lemmy on. It's like, oh, I worked with Lemmy.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
And
so
Doug,
that
and
was great.
Doug got to do the music video with him, I think,
Yeah,
if I'm
well,
not
you know, yeah, that's
mistaken.
now that's a nice bit of trivia because that was the last time. Obviously, Doug went on to
Mhm.
play Pinhead another five or six
At
times.
least 5 more films.
Yeah, but he's not in
Something
just
along there. He was there
the
for a
one.
good
Yeah,
while.
but well, he definitely did five, six, seven, and eight.
I think 8 was the last one. I
Yeah,
think that was Hell World.
so he definitely did. He was Pinhead again, and Gary did the makeup on every one of those movies. So there is a through line. Um, but the thing about the Hellraiser video, the Lemmy video, is that was the last time Clive directed Doug as Pinhead. Because Clive, it wasn't Tony Hickok. Tony Hickok shot the movie, obviously,
Right.
but Clive directed the music video. So that's a little bit of trivia that Clive's last direction of Doug Bradley as Pinhead was
The video.
the
Yeah.
Motorhead video for Hellraiser 3.
That's wonder. Yeah, that's cool. It was a fun movie. I thought, you had big shoes. I mean, Terry Farrell probably had some big shoes to fill, placing Ashley, but I thought she did a great job. I remember her being in, I think it was Star Trek Deep Space
Yeah,
Nine, one of the
oh
Star
sure.
Trek shows. So
Oh no, Terry was great. We hadn't seen each other for God more than 20 years, but there was a big Hellraiser reunion in Vegas. You know, at one of these autograph show things, which a
yeah,
lot of the cast do. I mean, obviously, nobody's interested in the writer, so I tend not to be invited to them for the most part. But because this was a big Hellraiser
hmm
reunion, they figured I would invite him as well because at least he was the bartender.
right. They knew you more as the bartender than the actual guy who wrote the story.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, but it was great because I hadn't seen Terry for that long. I mean, we remained friends on social media,
Right.
but whereas all the center, Barbie Wild was there, Simon Bamford, Nick Vince, obviously Doug, and but I'd stayed in touch with them, and who I don't want to miss anybody. Oh, Kim Myers and Valentina Vargas from Bloodline,
From
however,
Bloodline, yes.
were also there as well. So that was really nice to see everybody. I mean, I see the Cenobites all the time, but it was great to hook up with them. Yeah, and I thought Terry was great, as was Paula Marshall as the other female lead in
Yeah.
Hellraiser 3. And just because I am aware that a lot of people do think, oh, they turned him into Freddy
Mhm.
with number 3. And the thing I'd say about number 3 now in retrospect is it's arguably not a great Hellraiser movie, but I think it is a pretty, yeah, and you've already touched on this. It's a pretty good example of an 80s horror, a late 80s horror movie.
Mhm.
Technically, it's 1991, but
Right.
it has that sort of MTV rapid cut in rock music on the soundtrack, little bit more lighthearted. I mean, it's pretty nasty, but
Well, yeah, still some nasty
yeah.
scenes in
So I
there.
think I'm perfectly proud of it as a 1980s horror movie. And
Oh, for
but
sure.
I hear the criticisms that it's a little
Hmm.
lighter in intent than the first two, and that's why, despite the pig's ear we made of Bloodline, there's a lot of hardcore Hellraiser fans who prefer Bloodline to number 3.
I'm actually one of them,
Yeah,
actually,
there you go.
but and not by much. It's just just kind of where
Oh,
I put
sure,
them.
sure.
But with is one little interesting trivia I'll throw back. Paul Marsh, of course, that was Hellraiser 3, directed by Anthony Hitchcock,
Yeah.
who also directed Warlock 2,
Oh,
which
yeah.
also co-starred Paula Marshall
Oh,
in
as a
that.
direct consequence of three, yeah, he asked her during the shoot if she'd be interested in going with it. Yeah,
Yeah, excellent. So
and we,
now we do get to Hellraiser Bloodline,
yeah,
and I, by and large, I remember seeing the film in the theaters. I really liked it. I think it gets sometimes it gets too much crap, I guess, because they say it's Pinhead in
Pinhead in
space.
space.
But
Yeah,
that's really kind of bullshit because that's really about 20 minutes of the movie, really. So I like the arc you were going for in we're going to basically have a movie focused on the beginnings of the puzzle box itself, where it came from, how it was created, and following the bloodline of the creator himself
right.
through these three different time periods. And unfortunately, and you can speak to this, the studio decided to get involved to the point to where even though the finished product is still pretty good, I've read the book, it could have been a lot better.
Right.
So to the point to where they caused it, I forget the gentleman who initially directed the film, caused him to quit and take
Oh,
the
yeah, no,
Allen's.
Kevin Yeager, brilliant
That's
special
right.
effects guy. The Freddy, Chucky, Tales from the Crypt.
Hmm.
Kevin was great, and yeah, Hellraiser Bloodline is technically an Alan Smithy movie,
Right.
um, which they don't use it anymore. I gather. So to anybody under 40, that probably doesn't mean what it used to mean. Um, for anybody under 40 who's listening, I'll make this quick. Alan Smithy was a DGA approved pseudonym that a director could choose to put on a movie that he or she felt had been taken away from them. So if you look up Alan Smithy's filmography on IMDb, it's very varied. You've got Shadow of a Gunfighter in 1957, the TV version of Dune in 1985, Hellraiser Blood. So Alan Smithy, very interesting filmmaker, all over the place.
Yeah, he's been had a long career for
Yeah,
sure.
but I might be wrong, but I haven't seen an Alan Smithy credit for 20 years now. So I think
Maybe they
you'd have to
retired
check
it.
with the committees at DGA, but I think they've retired the pseudonym now. I think, but yeah, it was Kevin Yeager, and Kevin was a great guy, and I'm sorry what happened. I remember literally being in the story conference room at Miramax because those are the other anecdotes. It was the Weinstein brothers who made
Right.
Razor Phone. Anyway, it wasn't so much Harvey as Bob. Dimension was Bob's responsibility, the horror imprint inside
Right.
Mattress Dimension. But I remember, and I can't remember what triggered it because there was so much bullshit going on by then. But it might have been the moment when Kevin said, fuck this. I'm taking the Alan Smithy. I'm off this. Or it might have been a smaller argument. But I remember Bob Weinstein getting like 2 inches away from Kevin's face and screaming, "This means war, you fucker!"
Oh
And I
God.
thought, wow. Um, so yeah, it did mean war, and, and Kevin was off, and it was an Alan Smithy movie. So there are sections of the movie. Again, I know a lot of you viewers will know this, Josh, but there's sections of the movies that were there was a longish reshoot where there was some scenes written by Rand Ravitch, who went on to write The Astronaut's Wife, and I'm sure he's got a more impressive filmography with which I'm not entirely familiar. And it was shot by Joe Chappelle, who done one of the Halloweens, I think.
Halloween 6.
Yeah,
He had
right.
just finished Halloween 6 when I think they
Right,
brought
and
him
Miramax
in.
had that franchise too at that point. Yeah.
Right, they
So
did.
yeah, so yeah, Rand Ravitch and Joe Chappelle. So some of the well, I mean, I don't want to mire it. I don't want to get too in the weeds. But some of the Angelique origin stuff, like in my version, Angelique was just a demon from the beginning. I mean, she looked
Right.
gorgeous, looked like a princess, but she was a demon from the get go. But the whole peasant girl who becomes Angelique,
Hmm.
that was a Rand Ravitch written scene. and then there are other scenes that I've forgotten
Right.
later in the movie.
I've
Um,
seen the work print of it, so I've seen
yeah, there's
some of the scenes, particularly the Angelique scenes, which is,
right,
I think, one of the things I liked about the book, and I'll show this there, is here
right,
about what was it, about a couple years ago, you released the original screenplay as a
yeah,
book. So for those of you who pick it up at Amazon or Barnes and Noble Press, that's where I picked it up. But the two things I like better that the book does better is a more of a backstory of Angelique, because I think it's clear she's been a real fan figure character from that movie, and I wish we would
sure.
have gotten more of her in future movies, which I don't know why they didn't bring her back, but
Well, partly I think because I have to admit that just as much as I hated Miramax and Clive hated Miramax and Kevin Yeager hated Miramax and pretty much everybody who worked on the movie hated Miramax, I need to be honest, they fucking hated us too. I mean, they weren't going to bring me back to
right.
write another one because as far as they were concerned, it was all our fault. It was not their fault. It was our fault. And I'm not impartial. So I just want to say for the record, they hate us and think it's our fault just as much as we hate them and think it's theirs. I also want to say, in terms of the executives that I worked with on a day to day basis, Jeff Kurz, Richard Potter, again, I'm forgetting other people, but I
Right.
mean, they were terrific. But yeah,
It was the higher ups, the
yeah,
people.
weirdly, I don't really think there was a villain. I think the real problem, the real bad thing they did to Kevin, um, wasn't really even in post production, and I have no idea why this is the case. They were literally. This is why I quit halfway through um, the shoot. I mean, I'd done like 5 drafts of the script anyway, but
Yeah.
they were literally cutting his budget, and I'm not shitting you, on a daily basis. So, like, he would
Hmm.
wake up. I'm putting myself in Kevin's head here, but you'd wake up and you think, okay, I'm going to start that sequence today, and I know I've got 3 days to shoot it. And by the time he got to set, Nancy, who was the on-set producer, Nancy Ray Stone, she'd say, "We've only got a day and a half, and we haven't got the hall we were going to use. We're going to shoot it here." So he had this every fucking day. This was happening, and so I mean, either somebody had really screwed up on the budget to begin with. I don't really know why
Right.
this was happening, but I do know that it was driving Kevin insane, and he
I
just
imagine so.
he was really cutting his legs out from under him. It was hard to make the movie. He This is a little bit blowing my own trumpet, and I apologize, but but
Not at
I'm
all.
the guest. Other people can come on and blow their trumpet. But what I wanted to say was Kevin really wanted to get into directing. He'd done a couple of Tales from the Crypt episodes.
Right.
He might, no, it was going to be, and I remember he had said when Miramax approached him, he had said, I do not want directorial move my first directing efforts, whatever, my debut directorial picture. I don't want it to be number 4 in a franchise. I'm not going to do it. And then they sent him the script you read, the script that was eventually
Right.
published. And that was what persuaded him to do it, which, obviously I'm very flattered and very touched by. Yeah, because
Hmm.
Kevin was, he was a big noise. Like I say, Freddy, Chucky, Tales from the Crypt. Um, and he read it and said, "Oh no, I want to make this movie after all." So I got on great with him, and that was the movie he wanted to make. And for whatever reason, whether it was genuine budget issue, again, perhaps Miramax would say, "What you're not telling them, Pete, is that Kevin was going over budget on all those days," and I don't think he was, but I'm just saying I'm not privy to the.
Right. All the
I
economics of
just
it.
thought that this poor creative was getting reamed by these guys daily. Um, and every day, similarly, I would wake up, and again, this is how long ago it was. It wasn't even, it was fax. I would wake up every day to a fax from Nancy saying, can we cut this scene? Can we make this scene shorter? Can we move this scene over here? And this is long after what they call the production draft.
Right.
Um, this is during the production of the movie. They were literally asking me to hack it to pieces. And I tried to be a team player for, I think the total shoot was 5 weeks, maybe. So I think for the first 2.5, 3 weeks, I hated what it was, but so I would, truncate the scene and literally fax the pages back to Nancy. Um, and then by week 3, it was just like, well, this is ridiculous. I mean, I actually quit first. So I guess the scene when Bob was screaming at Kevin that I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
I guess that was before they'd wrapped, because otherwise Bob wouldn't have had me in the room at that point because
Right.
I'd
I'd already quit.
so he already hated me. That was a long babble. But yeah, so that's why it was an Alan Smithy movie. But Kevin was trying to make the version that you read, and then it got a bit messed up.
One question I wanted to
I-
ask you about this, and this happens
yeah,
in the third act.
Josh, I'm
Go
so
ahead.
sorry. Can I just say, only because you'd mentioned it in passing, and
Oh,
again,
sure. Go
I
ahead.
wouldn't want to. I really, yeah, Angelique is a huge fan favorite, and Valentina looked fantastic, both as human Angelique and this is where I want to pat people on the back, as the Cenobite Angelique. Um, and one of the reasons I mean, I like to think some of the reason was the character I invented, but I got to give the gold star to Tunnicliffe, to Gary again, because that design,
Oh, yeah.
Luke Cenobite, is like, oh my God, that is no shade on Grace Kirby in the first movie and Barbie Wilde in the second movie. The OG female Cenobite is fantastic, but that look of Angelique, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
no false modesty. I don't think it's. I think it's Gary's design that really has kept her.
And they kind of use that similar design with one of the other Cenobites in the newest movie. I forget which one it's
There's
called.
definitely design echoes all over the place. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But oh yeah, she's definitely a big part of that movie and one of the more popular. I think next to Doug's Pinhead, it's almost kind of like an equal thing, which is how you kind of wrote those characters in the first place. They
Yeah.
have a much more
Josh, the barbed
and
wire, barman fire breathing Cenobite is everybody's favorite, isn't it? Come on, man.
well, maybe from 3. I'm talking about from 4. I think it's like neck and neck there
Yeah, right.
between
Sure.
Pinhead and, of
Yeah,
course,
no,
barbed
it
wire.
is. It is a
Barbies.
brilliant design by Gary. It's really good, really good.
But the one thing I've always wondered is when you're into Act 3, and this is when they're out in outer space, you had a character also on the space station with Merchant by the name of, I think it's Corinne Cotton.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, it would seem, it doesn't
Oh,
quite,
sure.
it doesn't flat out say it, but we would assume this is an ancestor or descendant of Kirsty Cotton.
Yeah.
Was there an early idea of possibly bringing Ashley Lawrence back to play more or less a descendant of her
Yeah.
original character?
I would love to say yes, but the truth is, no. It was very conscious. I mean, I called it Cotton because I wanted exactly people to go, oh.
Yeah.
But no, either we already knew Ashley was done with us, because she did a little cameo for us in 3.
3.
But she didn't come out to North Carolina for the shoot. That was shot in LA before we went out. And yeah, I mean, Ash and I stayed friends for decades after that. So
Right.
it was not a personal thing. But I think she was probably trying to move her career in other directions. So it did not occur to me to actually suggest we use Ashley for the role. But yes, the surname was definitely meant to be a little wink, which
Well,
of course,
it kind
which
of
is
brings the
bullshit, of
whole
course, because it would suggest that Corinne must have been a descendant on the matrilineal line, because in the primitive days of the 1980s and 1990s, if Kirsty had got married, she probably, not definitely, would have taken her husband's name. So the descendants wouldn't have been Cottons, but I figured nobody's going to work that shit out. So it'll be.
Well, you could always say that maybe
She
the
divorced that fucker and went back to her maiden name.
exactly,
Yeah, right.
which kind of that. So you could have played around with that. What I liked about doing that, that brings all four movies, then those first four movies,
Sure.
almost full circle, because it would make sense that maybe a descendant of that Cotton lineage now working with the Le
Yeah, Lama
Marchand
Chandler. Yeah,
lineage to rid the galaxy of Cenobites.
right.
That really kind of brings everything full. So I always thought that was a clever little thing you added
Oh,
to
well,
the
thanks,
book.
man. Yeah, that was deliberate. And by the way, we really did think very conscious. I mean, this is before the production went to hell.
Mm.
Um, Back when Miramax loved us and were really eager to make it. Um, but Clive and I really figured we're wrapping it up. This is it. This is
Yeah.
so I really did want it. In a way, we weren't even sure what we could do with a number four because we figured the three movies. Yeah, we got Pinhead back. We got Elliot Spencer back into Pinhead's body. So we already thought we'd put a bow on it. And also, although I guess by then some franchise were already getting up into the higher numbers, but we none of us thought back then that there's going to be a Scream 7 or a Nightmare 10.
Right, right.
So we just assumed this is probably it. So it was very much in my head to bookend the three we'd done with like a prequel,
Hmm.
a middle bit that was contemporary too, and then the sequel in space that would just that would bookend the existing things.
Yeah.
So it was very consciously written as that. So then the franchise turned out to have kind of legs. I mean, only direct to video legs, but kind of legs.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the and like we were talking off camera. I mean, I've said there's some positives of each of those movies that came out,
Oh, I'm
but
sure. Yeah.
they just don't feel like Hellraiser movies. They don't feel connected to the original
Right.
universe that Clive initially started and you continued forward. And of course, Doug being the
Yeah.
constant of all four
Well,
of
Doug
those
is the through
movies.
line. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I guess what last question I wanted to ask is
Sure.
what kind of advice could you give to those who want to get into screenwriting? Don't do it.
Yeah. Kill yourself. No, I actually no, I wouldn't. I would say that all the horror stories you hear about screenwriters being abused and ignored and rewritten and all that, I mean, it's kind of true.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, you should be made of tougher stuff than that. Fucking put up with it because it's it is it's great to have a movie made. It's the satisfactions. I can't speak for other people who've perhaps been made unhappier than I was. See, the problem is I always had parallel careers because the movies paid a lot better. Don't get me wrong. I would never have made a living as a writer if I was only writing books and stories. But I was writing books and stories. So in a way, no matter how much they hurt me, Josh,
Mhm.
in the movie stuff, I had the safety valve of doing my own stuff in publishing. So actually that would be the advice I would give people who are thinking about screenwriting. Don't make it the only thing you do. Um, Either if you're really into film, think about directing your own stuff because the way to protect your work from being fucked with um, is either to have another level of control, such as directing the stuff, or write prose fiction or poetry, whatever the hell you want.
Right.
Write something else that will allow you to feel uninjured by the stupid profession you've chosen. Also, um, for the record, despite the experience with Hellraiser 4, I was a really lucky screenwriter. I had pretty much a great time on it. I mean, we haven't even talked about Wishmaster, for example, which came after Hellraiser 4, and certainly, solved the wound for me, because that was a great experience. Um, I realize not all screenwriters are that lucky, with the exception of them bringing Rand in for the reshoot on Hellraiser 4. And again, no offense to Rand, but I mean, that was only because I quit. They would have happily let me do the rewrite pages if I'd wanted to. But for the most part, those horror stories that you hear didn't really happen to me. I got on great with my producers. I got on great with my directors. I was not rewritten by any third party. Um, Obviously, directors have input. Once you're into pre-production,
Hmm.
every director thinks he can work it out better than the writer. But still friends to this day with Tony Randall. I was still friends with. We sadly lost Tony 2 years ago. I don't know if you know that Tony.
Oh,
Tony died in 2023, which is very sad. But again, he and I very close for the 20 years after Hellraiser 3. And we wrote about 12 scripts together, actually.
wow.
Um, and then Kevin Yeager, not Alan Smithy, Kevin and I have not stayed in touch the way I did with the two Tonys. But we got on fine until the movie. But again,
Yeah.
nothing went wrong in our relationship. But I'm not on a day-to-day basis. And Bob Kurtzman, who did Wishmaster, moved back to Ohio. So again, we don't hang out, but we're still friends to this day.
Awesome.
So I've actually been very lucky. So in a way, wannabe screenwriters who hear all those horror stories, I'm kind of a model for it doesn't have to be that bad. Um, and weirdly, I would put that back to what I said way earlier when we were talking, that you've got to be a little bit good. Yeah, you have to
Hmm.
have some talent. um, But also, you've got to get on with people. Be good in the room. Be
Right.
fun. Be open. Don't be a dick. Don't because the thing is, I'd started in theatre, as we talked about, and in music, in bands, which are very. I mean, obviously, high end theatre is not. It's all collaborative, and being involved with a bunch of mates doing a thing you like is just fucking terrific. So, and having learned from theatre, and especially from being in rock and roll bands, that there's got to be a bit of give and take. Oh,
Exactly.
solo on this one, or you know. So there's something great about the collaborative nature, and if you're not open to collaborative art, maybe don't be a screenwriter, or do your screenplay, send it away, and don't think about it. Go off and do a novel, and then maybe they'll make a good version of the movie. Maybe they won't.
Right.
Um, but I just like, and again, I was quite lucky because most writers aren't on set. TV is different. Writers obviously run the show a lot more
Right.
on TV,
With
but
movies, it's a lot different, I take
yeah,
it.
right, right. But on movies, mostly the writer isn't there. But if they couldn't get rid of me, I just fucking planted myself.
Just
But
follow them around.
I was
No,
just
what are you
around on set. And the great thing is, if the movie's going well, I've got nothing to do. I'm just sitting in the fancy chair eating craft service.
doing?
And so, so no, I would not want anybody to be put off the profession of screenwriting, because if you grow up loving the movies, it's a great thing to get a movie made. But you should go in with your eyes open and be aware that there will be disappointments, there will be backstabbing, all that.
Yeah, if you understand all that,
If
you'll
you
be
understand
good.
all that, yeah, just be meaner. If if they're going to stab you in the back, fucking get them first. You know what I mean?
There you
No,
go.
no, no. No, be nice, be nice, and try and communicate your enthusiasm because that will bring out the other person's enthusiasm, and then it's just a love fest.
Just kind of like it was between yourself and Chris Figg there,
Yeah, right.
going way back to it. Awesome. Well, we'll touch this real quickly. You know, with Hellraiser, of course, you pretty much took Clive's creation and ran with it. With Wishmaster, was that entirely your creation, or how did that start?
It's technically and legally my creation because until something's on paper, nobody um, there's no intellectual property unless something's on paper. You can't have an idea. But no, I didn't wake up thinking evil genie. That's the thing. I literally got a phone call from a friend of mine who had been working at New World back in the Hellraiser. Well, it's only like 6 years later, but it felt further
Like
away back then.
20.
Yeah, right. But I got a phone call from a friend of mine, Eric Salzgeber, who's a writer himself, wrote some Hellraiser comic books, in fact, and a couple and two or three movies. But he was working for Pierre David, who had been David Cronenberg's producer
Oh,
earlier,
wow.
and on the early, maybe up to the Brood, but
So 70s, probably early mid 70s
yeah.
Cronenberg
I
stuff.
mean, when they were still in Canada, because I think Pierre
Yeah.
was French Canadian, same as Cronenberg is, I
Yeah,
think.
he's from
Yeah,
Canada.
right. Yeah. Um, but Pierre now had, it's going to sound, had a much less classy operation than David Cronenberg movie. He had a nice, tough little B movie organization, and Eric was working for him. Anyway, Eric calls me, and I guess it was. Yeah, it was after. Yeah, Bloodline had already come out, I guess. Um, but he called me and said, "Do you want to write an Evil Genie movie for Pierre?" And I said, again, as I've said this before, I apologize if you've heard it. I literally said to Eric, "Fuck off, Evil Genie."
That's
Uh,
actually the first time of me hearing that.
yeah, right. and and I said something like, "If you think I'm going to waste my time coming in pitching at," and Eric said, "Shut up. Nobody's pitching shit. Whatever it was, Hellraiser 3, Hellraiser 4 is a hit. You've got the job if you want it. So we're going to pay you to write an Evil Genie movie. How does it sound now?" And I said, "Well, it sounds great now, Eric. That's a really good idea. Evil Genie. Okay, let me see." And that's actually true. I really did think it was a terrible idea. Still kind of do. But again, the chemistry of the people you get to work with. They brought me in for a meeting, and I met. Obviously, I knew Eric, but I met Eric and I met Pierre and a guy called Clark Peterson, who was the hands-on producer of the thing.
Okay.
And again, they were great. We had a really fun session, and then they very and again, this is still the pre-tech days. They very kindly handed me a massive Xeroxed pile of articles from Encyclopedia Britannica and the Arabian, like research
Mhm.
material about genies and jinns and efrits. And I said, "Oh, thank you very much." And I went home and I put them in a corner, and they're still over there. Just wrote the movie. So yeah, in that sense, yes, it was mine, but it was prompted by uh,
They gave you the general idea of the
yeah.
story, and then you had to kind of make it work, which I think it did. I like the seen the first two Wishmaster
Oh, I
movies.
only did the first one. Yeah, I mean, then
Right, you did the first
no,
one, and
it's weird.
I've met.
I've got the fun of thinking, "Hey, I created a franchise." Now, admittedly, it's the least important franchise of all the monster movie franchises, but it's four movies, mate.
Yeah, you'd be
So
surprised how many people love those movies. So you'll find those ones
well,
that just. I'm
well,
kind of like the
they,
same way
they
with the
do, and
Warlock
again,
movies. I love the Warlock movies, and they don't really get talked a whole lot about.
sure, yeah, that was great. Warlock was
Excellent.
yeah, no, I love the fact that people still like it. I mean, again, I've been very lucky in the sense of even when people didn't like things when they came out, the years have been kind. You know, it's like they end up. Oh yeah, actually, they've forgotten those snooty elevated horror movies they were talking about back then. Turns out they do like the trash we were doing. Oh, right.
Well, think about this. Remember, John Carpenter's The Thing was a disaster at the box
Oh
office.
yeah.
Everyone hated it. And now, 20, 30, 40 years later, it's considered a classic. And
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
it certainly
Yeah.
seems like the Hellraiser franchise is. I've noticed that it's getting more and more recognition. I think it's obviously with the first two, but even 3 and 4 have their fans. So,
Well, yeah. No, thank
thank you on behalf of all the Hellraiser fans out there. Thank you for your
Oh,
contribution to
well,
the
thank you. Thank you
franchise.
very much. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so any last words you'd like to say tonight before we sign off?
Um, Again, thank you for having me. Thank you,
Hmm.
anybody who watches. Uh, if you wonderful people out there are horror movie geeks, I'm a horror movie geek too. We're all. I'm pretty sure Josh is. We are all. We're all the same tribe, whether you're as ancient as me or as young as I'm sure some of your viewers are. It's a kind of timeless tribe that we like this stuff for some reason, and it's a bonding agent for all of us. So God bless you. Thanks for enjoying horror. Thank you, especially for enjoying any of the crap I did. And see you at the movies.
Yep. And thanks everyone for watching tonight. And thank Peter for joining me. And we will see you next time. So have a good night, everyone.